The conductor's hand closed around Josephine's wrist like an iron shackle, and she watched through tears as her mother climbed aboard the westbound train without looking back, clutching that single ticket as though it were salvation itself. The evening sun blazed copper across the Texas sky, turning the dusty platform of Val Verde into something that looked almost beautiful, though Josephine could find no beauty in this moment as the locomotive's whistle screamed and her mother disappeared into a passenger car, leaving her 19-year-old daughter behind like unwanted baggage. "What am I supposed to do with her?" the conductor demanded. His weathered face twisted with irritation as he released Josephine's arm. "Your mama said you'd work off the debt, but I ain't running no employment office here." Josephine stood frozen on the platform, her threadbare calico dress hanging loose on her thin frame, unable to form words past the lump of betrayal lodged in her throat. Her mother had done it. Actually done it. Traded her own flesh and blood for passage to California, where some man Josephine had never met supposedly waited with promises of a better life. The shame burned hotter than the Texas heat. "I said, what are you planning to do, girl?" The conductor's voice rose sharply. "Leave her be." The voice came from behind them, deep and steady, carrying the kind of authority that made men listen. "I will handle this." Josephine turned to find a tall cowboy striding across the platform, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each purposeful step. He wore a faded blue shirt and worn leather chaps, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing a face that might have been carved from the same red rock that dotted the Texas landscape. His jaw was strong, his eyes a startling green beneath dark brows, and something in his expression spoke of a man who had seen enough of the world's cruelties to recognize another when it stood weeping on a train platform. "You know this girl, Prescott?" the conductor asked, suspicion heavy in his tone. "I do now," the cowboy replied, closing the distance between them. He was perhaps 25, Josephine guessed, with the lean, muscled build of someone who spent his days working cattle under the merciless sun. How much did her mother owe for that ticket? The conductor's eyes narrowed. $32. The woman gave me the girl as collateral, said she would send money once she got settled in Sacramento. "We both know that money ain't coming," Prescott said, pulling a worn leather wallet from his pocket. Josephine watched in stunned silence as he counted out bills, each one representing hours of hard labor, days in the saddle, weeks away from whatever comfort a bed might offer. "Here is $35. The extra is for your trouble. Now get on that train and leave the girl alone." The conductor snatched the money with greedy fingers, counting it twice before tipping his hat in mock courtesy. "Pleasure doing business, Prescott Turner." He climbed aboard just as the train lurched forward, steam hissing from beneath the great iron wheels. Josephine stood rooted to the spot as the train gathered speed, carrying her mother away from her forever. She should have felt something, she thought. Anger, maybe? Or a desperate sadness. Instead, she felt hollow, as empty as the vast Texas sky stretching overhead. The woman who birthed her had valued her at less than the price of a train ticket. "What is your name?" Prescott asked gently, drawing her attention back to him. "Josephine. Josephine Oakes." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Why did you do that? You do not even know me." He studied her for a long moment, those green eyes seeming to see straight through to the broken pieces inside her. "No man should treat a dog the way your mama just treated you. Come on, you look like you have not eaten a proper meal in weeks." It was true. Her mother had been rationing their food for months, saving every penny for that ticket, though Josephine had not known the true cost until 20 minutes ago. Her stomach had forgotten what fullness felt like. "I cannot accept charity from a stranger," she said, though her resolve wavered even as the words left her mouth. She had exactly 12 cents in her pocket, no family, no prospects, and nowhere to go in a town she had never seen before today. "Then consider it a loan," Prescott said, a hint of something almost like amusement touching his features. "You can pay me back when you get yourself settled, but first let us get some food in you before you fall over." The hotel restaurant sat adjacent to the train depot, a modest establishment with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread wafting through its open windows. Prescott guided her to a corner table, and Josephine found herself sitting across from this stranger who had just spent more money on her freedom than most men earned in a month. "Order whatever you want," he said, flagging down a waitress. Josephine's hands trembled as she looked at the handwritten menu. Everything seemed impossibly expensive. "Just soup would be fine." "She will have the steak dinner with all the fixing," Prescott told the waitress firmly. "And bring some of that apple pie after. I will have the same." After the waitress left, silence settled between them, thick and uncomfortable. Josephine studied her hands, noting how rough they had become, the nails bitten to the quick. She had worked as a laundress since she was 14, helping her mother make ends meet after her father died in a mining accident. 5 years of lye soap and scalding water, and it had all led to this: abandoned in a strange town, dependent on the kindness of a cowboy whose motives she could not begin to understand. "I do not understand," she finally said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "Why would you help me? What do you want from me?" Prescott leaned back in his chair, and something sad flickered across his face. 6 years ago, I watched my sister get sold to a saloon keeper by the man our mama married after our daddy passed. I was 19 and foolish, and I did not have enough money to stop it. By the time I earned enough to buy back her contract, she had disappeared. I have been looking for her ever since." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Maybe I could not save Caroline, but I could save you. That's all. Nothing more." The raw honesty in his words struck something deep in Josephine's chest. She had expected him to want something from her, some payment in the form of labor or worse, but the grief in his voice rang true. "I am sorry about your sister." "Me too." He straightened as the waitress returned with 2 plates laden with food that made Josephine's mouth water. Steak and potatoes and green beans glistening with butter, fresh rolls still warm from the oven. She tried to eat slowly to maintain some dignity, but hunger won out. The food tasted better than anything she could remember, and she had to blink back tears as she realized this cowboy, this Prescott Turner, had given her something her own mother had not: basic human kindness without condition. "Where were you headed before all this, Gay?" Prescott asked between bites. "I did not know we were going anywhere until this morning," Josephine admitted. "My mother woke me before dawn, told me to pack my things. She said we were going to visit her sister in El Paso. I should have known something was wrong. She does not have a sister." The betrayal felt fresh all over again, and she set down her fork as her appetite disappeared. "She told me on the train that she met a man through letters, someone who lives in Sacramento. He sent money for 1 ticket, just one. And she chose herself over you." "Yes." The word came out bitter. "She said I was old enough to make my own way now, that I would understand someday when I had children of my own." Josephine laughed, but it held no humor. "I cannot imagine ever understanding that." Prescott's expression hardened. "You should not have to understand it. What she did was wrong, plain and simple." They finished their meal in relative silence, and when the pie came, Josephine found her appetite returning. The sweetness of the apples and cinnamon felt like a small rebellion against the awfulness of the day. "So what happens now?" she asked as Prescott paid their bill, adding a generous tip that made the waitress smile. "Now I take you to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. She's a decent woman, runs a respectable place for working girls. You can stay there while you figure out your next step. I told you I only have 12 cents. And I told you to consider it a loan." Prescott held the door open for her, and they stepped back out into the evening heat. The sun had sunk lower, painting Val Verde in shades of orange and purple. The town was larger than Josephine had expected, with a main street lined with shops and businesses, side streets branching off into residential areas. In the distance, she could see the dark shapes of cattle in holding pens, hear the occasional shout of cowboys finishing their day's work. "I do not know how I could ever pay you back," Josephine said, as they walked down the wooden sidewalk. I have no skills except washing clothes." "Mrs. Henderson might need help with laundry," Prescott offered. "And the hotel is always looking for housekeepers. Val Verde is growing fast. The railroad brought opportunity for better or worse." He glanced at her. "You strike me as someone who works hard." "I do. I will. I want to." The words tumbled out awkwardly. Everything felt surreal, as though she were moving through a dream. This morning she had been in the small rented room she shared with her mother in Fort Stockton, poor but together. Tonight she was alone in a strange town, her entire life upended. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house was a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and flower boxes in the windows. A hand-painted sign declared "Rooms for Respectable Women" in neat letters. Prescott knocked, and within moments, a plump woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes opened the door. "Prescott Turner, I have not seen you in town for near about 3 months," she said warmly. Then her gaze fell on Josephine, and her expression shifted to concern. "What have we here?" "This is Miss Josephine Oakes. She finds herself in need of a room and perhaps employment. I am vouching for her character and will cover her first month's rent." Mrs. Henderson looked between them, clearly trying to piece together the story. "Come in, dear. You look dead on your feet." She ushered Josephine inside while Prescott waited on the porch. The interior was clean and comfortable, with lace curtains and the smell of lavender. "I have a small room on the second floor, $3 a week including breakfast and supper. Lunch is on your own." "I can do laundry," Josephine said quickly, "or cleaning, cooking, anything you need." "Well, now I could use help with the washing, truth be told. These old hands ain't what they used to be." Mrs. Henderson patted Josephine's arm. "We will work something out. Let me show you the room." The room was tiny, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand, but it had a window that overlooked the street, and the linen smelled fresh. After weeks of uncertainty, sleeping on floors and in train stations as her mother led them toward Val Verde and her betrayal, this small space felt like a palace. "Thank you," Josephine whispered. "Thank Prescott." Mrs. Henderson said, "He is one of the good ones. Works for the Double T Ranch north of town. They run cattle and horses, and he has a reputation as the best bronc buster in 3 counties. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "All the girls have tried to catch his eye, but he keeps to himself mostly. Lost his sister some years back, and I think it weighs on him." After Mrs. Henderson left to fetch fresh water for the basin, Josephine stood at the window, watching the street below. She spotted Prescott walking toward the livery stable, his tall frame easy to pick out even in the gathering darkness. He had saved her today without asking anything in return, driven by a tragedy in his own past. She wondered if he knew he had given her more than just money and a room. He had given her back her dignity, shown her that not everyone in the world was cruel or selfish. She slept deeply that night, exhausted by emotion and travel, and woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains. Voices drifted up from downstairs along with the smell of coffee and bacon. Josephine splashed water on her face, braided her long brown hair, and smoothed her wrinkled dress before venturing down. The dining room held 4 other women, all older than Josephine, chattering over breakfast. They looked up with curious eyes as she entered. "Girls, this is Miss Oakes. She'll be staying with us," Mrs. Henderson announced, setting a plate before an empty chair. "Josephine, that is Miss Clara, Miss Ruth, Miss Anne, and Miss Dorothy. They all work at various establishments in town." The women greeted her with varying degrees of warmth, and Josephine learned over breakfast that Clara worked at the general store, Ruth at the schoolhouse as an assistant, Anne at the telegraph office, and Dorothy helped her sister run a dress shop. They were full of questions about where she came from and what had brought her to Val Verde, but Mrs. Henderson mercifully redirected the conversation before Josephine had to explain her shame. After breakfast, Mrs. Henderson showed Josephine the laundry setup behind the house: 2 large tubs, a scrubbing board, clotheslines strung between posts. "I take in washing from some of the bachelor cowboys and the men at the railroad office. Pay ain't much, but it is honest work. I will give you half of what I make from it, and we can call that payment toward your room and board. Sound fair?" "More than fair," Josephine agreed, relief washing through her. She would not be entirely dependent on Prescott's charity. She could earn her keep. She spent the day scrubbing shirts and trousers, her hands falling back into the familiar rhythm of work. The lye soap stung her already roughened skin, but the pain felt good somehow, grounding. She had purpose again. Direction. 3 days passed in this manner. Josephine worked hard, ate Mrs. Henderson's simple but filling meals, and tried not to think about her mother riding west to a new life. In the evenings, she sat on the porch with the other women, listening to their gossip and laughter, feeling like a ghost at the edge of someone else's life. On the 4th day, Prescott returned. Josephine was hanging laundry when she heard his voice at the front of the house, speaking with Mrs. Henderson. Her heart gave an unexpected lurch, and she quickly wiped her damp hands on her apron before walking around to the porch. He stood at the bottom of the steps, hat in hand, looking road-dusty and tired, but his face brightened when he saw her. "Miss Oakes, you are looking better." It was true. Regular meals had put color back in her cheeks, and the deep exhaustion had lifted from her bones. "Thanks to you, Mr. Turner." "Please, just Prescott." He shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncertain. "I wanted to check that you were settling in all right, that everything was working out." "It is. Mrs. Henderson has been wonderful, and I am working off my debt." "Good. That is good." He fell silent, and Josephine realized with a start that he was nervous. This confident cowboy who had faced down a railroad conductor and spent his hard-earned money on a stranger was nervous talking to her. "Would you like to sit?" she offered, gesturing to the porch chairs. "I could bring some water. It is a hot day." "I would like that." She fetched 2 glasses from the kitchen, ignoring Mrs. Henderson's knowing smile, and returned to find Prescott settled in one of the rocking chairs. She took the seat beside him, hyper-aware of his presence, the way his large hands dwarfed the water glass, the line of his jaw, the slight crinkle at the corners of his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. "The ranch keeps you busy," she said, not knowing what else to say. "We are breaking horses for the Army contract. It is good money but hard work. Some of those animals are half wild still." He took a long drink. "But I like it. Makes sense working with horses. They are honest. They kick you when they are mad, and that is that. No hidden motives." Josephine understood what he meant. "Not like people." "No, not like people." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching a wagon roll past on the street. Then Prescott said, "There is a dance this Saturday at the community hall. Nothing fancy, just folks gathering for music and company. I wondered if you might like to go. With me, I mean." Josephine's breath caught. "As in courting?" "I suppose I'm asking it wrong." Prescott ran a hand through his dark hair, making it stick up awkwardly. "I know you have been through a hard time, and the last thing you probably want is some cowboy sniffing around. But I find myself thinking about you quite a bit, wondering how you're doing, if you are all right. And I thought maybe spending some time together in a proper setting with other folks around might be pleasant, if you were interested." Her first instinct was to refuse. She barely knew him, and after her mother's betrayal, trusting anyone felt dangerous. But something in his earnest expression, the vulnerability he was showing by asking, made her pause. He had helped her without asking anything in return, had checked on her welfare out of genuine concern. Maybe, just maybe, he was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man trying to do right by the world. "I would like that," she heard herself say. "But I should warn you, I am not much of a dancer." Prescott's face broke into a genuine smile that transformed his serious features. "Neither am I. We will stumble around together and give everyone something to laugh about." After he left, promising to collect her Saturday evening at 6, Josephine returned to her laundry with a lightness in her chest she had not felt in longer than she could remember. Mrs. Henderson appeared moments later, barely containing her glee. "Prescott Turner just asked to court you. Child, do you know how many women in this town have tried to catch his attention? and he walks right up here and asks you to the dance." "We are just going as friends," Josephine protested, but even she did not believe it. "Friends nothing. That man looked at you like you hung the moon." Mrs. Henderson shook her head in wonder. "I suppose the heart wants what it wants." The next 2 days dragged by with agonizing slowness. Josephine found herself thinking about Prescott at odd moments, while scrubbing shirts, while eating supper, while lying in bed at night. She remembered the way he had stood up to the conductor without hesitation, how he had bought her a meal and secured her a room before he even knew her name. The grief in his voice when he spoke of his lost sister. Saturday arrived bright and hot. Josephine had exactly one dress that was not work-worn rags, a simple green cotton she had made herself 2 years ago. It was faded and out of fashion, but clean and mended. Dorothy from the boarding house helped her arrange her hair in a style that was more flattering, pinning it up to show her neck. "You have lovely eyes," Dorothy said, studying her in the mirror. "That green dress makes them look almost amber in the light." Josephine had never thought much about her appearance. Survival had taken precedence over vanity. But looking at herself now, clean and rested, and wearing something other than exhaustion, she could almost see what Dorothy meant. She would never be a classic beauty, but there was something in her face, a strength maybe, that gave her features character. Prescott arrived precisely at 6, wearing a clean shirt and trousers, his hair still damp from washing. He stared at her for a long moment before remembering his manners. "You look real nice, Josephine." "Thank you. So do you." They walked to the community hall as the evening cooled, talking easily about small things, the weather, the town, the ranch. Josephine learned that Prescott had been working at the Double T for 4 years, saving every penny he could in hopes of one day buying his own small spread. His dream was to breed horses, not just break them. "Seems to me there is more satisfaction in building something than just surviving," he explained. "I want land that belongs to me, animals that carry my brand, something permanent." "That sounds wonderful," Josephine said wistfully. "I have never had anything permanent. We moved around a lot after my father died, always chasing cheaper rent or better work. I used to dream about having a real home, with a garden maybe, somewhere I could stay." "You deserve that," Prescott said firmly. "Everyone does." The community hall buzzed with activity. A fiddle band played lively tunes in one corner while couples spun across the floor. Tables lined the walls, laden with food brought by various families. Children ran between the adults' legs, laughing and playing tag. The whole town seemed to have turned out. Prescott guided her through the crowd, introducing her to people. The ranch foreman and his wife, the general store owner, the blacksmith. Everyone greeted Prescott with respect and genuine fondness, and they welcomed Josephine warmly once they learned she was with him. "Prescott Turner finally brings a girl to a dance," the foreman's wife said with a teasing smile. "I thought this day would never come." They ate barbecue and cornbread, drank sweet tea, and when a slower song started, Prescott offered his hand. "Ready to give them something to laugh about?" Josephine let him lead her onto the floor, his hand warm against her waist, his other hand gentle as it clasped hers. They moved together awkwardly at first, but gradually found a rhythm. Josephine was hyper-aware of everywhere their bodies touched, the solid strength of him, the way he smelled of soap and leather, and something uniquely his own. "You are not as terrible as you claimed," she said, looking up at him. "You are better than terrible," he replied, and they both laughed. As the night wore on, something shifted between them. The awareness deepened into something more, something that made Josephine's pulse quicken when Prescott smiled at her. They danced several more songs, talked with other guests, shared a slice of cake. But all of it felt secondary to the current running between them, invisible but undeniable. Walking back to the boarding house under a sky full of stars, Prescott said quietly, "I have not felt this content in a long time. Thank you for coming with me tonight. I should be thanking you for everything, not just tonight, but all of it." Josephine stopped walking, forcing herself to be brave. "I meant what I said about not understanding why you helped me, but I am grateful. more grateful than I can properly express." Prescott turned to face her fully. In the moonlight, his features were all shadow and silver. "Maybe we helped each other. I have been angry for so long, angry at myself for not saving Caroline, angry at the world for being cruel. But helping you, seeing you recover and start building a life, it reminds me that good things are still possible, that not everything is loss and grief." The emotion in his voice moved something deep in Josephine's chest. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "We are quite a pair, are we not? Both trying to make sense of senseless things. Maybe that is exactly why we found each other." He walked her to Mrs. Henderson's door, but did not try to kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand and said, "I would like to see you again, if you are willing. Maybe next Sunday after church we could go for a ride. I could show you some of the country around here." "I would like that very much." Josephine lay awake for hours that night, replaying every moment. The sound of Prescott's laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength of his hand against her waist. She barely knew him, she reminded herself. It was too soon to be feeling this way, this flutter of hope and anticipation, but her heart did not seem to care about logic. Sunday arrived with clouds threatening rain, but Prescott showed up at the boarding house as promised with 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding for himself and a gentle mare for Josephine. Mrs. Henderson watched from the window like a proud mother as they rode off together. Prescott led them north out of town, through scrubland dotted with mesquite and cactus, toward distant hills that rose purple against the horizon. The threatened rain never materialized. Instead, the clouds made the heat bearable. "This is Double T land," Prescott explained as they rode. "The ranch runs about 5,000 head of cattle across 20 sections. The owner, Mr. Thatcher, is fair as bosses go, pays on time, treats his men right." "How many cowboys work there?" "About 30 regular hands, more during roundup and branding." He pointed to a line of cottonwoods in the distance. "There is a creek over there that runs year-round. Best water in the county. If I ever do get my own place, I want it to have water like that. A man can do anything with reliable water." They rode to the creek and dismounted, letting the horses drink. Josephine sat on a smooth rock near the bank, trailing her fingers in the cool water. Prescott settled beside her close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Tell me about growing up," he said, "before things got hard." Josephine thought back, sifting through memories. "It was good when my father was alive. We lived in a little house near the silver mines in Colorado. My daddy worked underground, and my mother kept house. I remember her singing while she cooked, and my father teaching me to identify birds by their calls. We did not have much, but we were happy." She paused, the old grief rising. "Then there was an accident, a tunnel collapse. They brought 5 men out that day, all dead. My father was one of them." "How old were you?" 14. Everything changed after that. My mother tried to keep the house, but without Daddy's income, we could not manage. We moved to cheaper rooms, then cheaper still. She got work as a seamstress, and I started taking in washing, but it was never enough. She grew bitter, I think, angry at my father for dying, angry at the world for being hard, angry at me for existing and needing food and clothes. Prescott's hand found hers, holding tight. "That was not your fault." "I know that in my head, but some part of me wonders if she would have taken that ticket for herself if I had not been there. If maybe I was the burden that made her desperate." "Stop that thinking right now." Prescott's voice was firm. "A mother who truly loves her child would starve before abandoning them. What your mother did says everything about her character and nothing about your worth." Tears pricked Josephine's eyes. "Sometimes I worry that I'm damaged now, that what she did broke something essential inside me and I will never be whole again." Prescott turned to face her fully, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "You are not broken. You are strong and brave and good. You survived something terrible. And you are still standing. That is not damage. That is courage. A sob broke from Josephine's throat, and then Prescott was holding her while she cried, all the grief and betrayal and fear she had been holding back pouring out. He did not try to shush her or tell her everything would be fine. He just held her, steady and solid, while she shattered and began slowly to piece herself back together. When the storm passed, Josephine pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I did not mean to fall apart on you." "Do not apologize for being human." Prescott brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I think you are remarkable, Josephine Oakes. I have thought so since the moment I saw you on that platform standing up straight despite everything falling apart around you." "I was not standing straight. I was falling apart." "No, you were standing. Maybe swaying a bit, but standing nonetheless." He smiled slightly. "I think I started falling for you right then." Josephine's breath caught. "Prescott. Too soon?" He looked worried. "I know it has only been a week, and you have been through hell, but I do not see the point in lying about how I feel." Instead of answering with words, Josephine leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, barely more than a brush of lips, but then Prescott made a low sound in his throat and deepened the kiss, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. Josephine's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on as though he might disappear if she let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Prescott rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to marry you someday, Josephine Oakes. I know it is crazy and fast, but I am certain of it." "That is crazy," she agreed, "but I think I'm certain of it too." They rode back to town as the sun sank low, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Josephine felt different, lighter somehow, as though confessing her pain and fear to Prescott had lifted a weight she had not known she was carrying. He had not judged her or found her wanting. He had simply held her and told her she was enough. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Prescott visited whenever his work allowed, which was usually twice a week. They took long rides through the countryside, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about his father dying of cholera when Prescott was 16, about his mother remarrying too quickly to a man who turned out to be cruel, about the guilt of not being able to protect Carolyn. "I was her big brother. I was supposed to keep her safe." The pain in his voice was raw even years later. "Instead, I watched her get sold like livestock. And then I lost track of her entirely. I hired a Pinkerton detective last year, gave him all my savings. He searched for 6 months and found nothing. It is like she vanished." "Maybe she escaped," Josephine suggested. "Maybe she is somewhere safe, living a good life." "I hope so. God, I hope so." Prescott looked at her. "But whether I find her or not, I cannot spend my whole life searching for ghosts. I have to keep living. I think Caroline would want that." Josephine shared her own dreams tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as Prescott listened with genuine interest. She wanted a home, she told him. A real home with a garden and chickens and maybe a milk cow. She wanted to wake up in the same bed every morning and know she belonged there. She wanted children someday, children she would never abandon, who would grow up secure in the knowledge that they were loved. "You will have all of that," Prescott promised. "I will make sure of it." As summer deepened into fall, Josephine's life in Val Verde took root. She had friends now among the boarding house women and the ranch wives she had met through Prescott. Her laundry work expanded as word spread about her skill with stains and her fair prices. She began saving money, adding coins to a tin box under her bed, dreaming of a future that felt increasingly possible. Prescott was courting her properly now, and the whole town knew it. They attended church together on Sundays, sat on Mrs. Henderson's porch in the evenings, went to barn dances and church socials. He never pushed for more than kisses, always respectful of her boundaries, though the attraction between them grew stronger with each passing week. 3 months after they met, Prescott took her to a spot on the Double T Ranch where the land rose in a gentle swell, offering a view of the valley below. The grass was still green from recent rains, and wildflowers dotted the hillside in bursts of yellow and purple. "This is the prettiest spot on the whole ranch," he said, helping her down from her horse. "I have been thinking about it a lot lately, about how it would be a good place to build a house, close enough to town but far enough for privacy, good grazing, good water." Josephine's heart began to pound. "Why are you showing me this?" Prescott took both her hands, and she realized he was trembling slightly. "Because I want to build that house with you in it. I know we have not been courting long by most standards, but I have never been more certain of anything. I love you, Josephine. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you make me laugh. I love how hard you work and how you never complain about things you cannot change. I love the sound of your voice and the way you look at me like I am someone worth looking at." He dropped to one knee, and Josephine's breath stopped entirely. "I am asking you to be my wife, to build a life with me right here. On this land I'm going to buy with every penny I have saved. I cannot promise it will be easy, but I can promise I will love you every day for the rest of my life. So what do you say? Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Josephine's face as she nodded, unable to form words past the emotion choking her throat. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, of course, yes." Prescott surged to his feet and kissed her deeply, his hands tangling in her hair, and Josephine kissed him back with all the love and hope she had been afraid to feel. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, Prescott pulled a simple silver ring from his pocket. "It was my grandmother's," he explained, sliding it onto her finger. "It fit perfectly. My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to a woman who deserved it. That is you, Josephine. You deserve everything good this world has to offer." They sat on the hillside for hours making plans. Prescott had been saving for years and had nearly enough to buy 10 acres from Mr. Thatcher, who had already agreed to sell. They would build a small house at first, just 2 rooms, and expand as they could afford it. Prescott would continue working at the Double T while establishing their own horse breeding operation. Josephine would keep taking in laundry until they were more established. "It will not be easy," Prescott warned again. "The first few years especially. We will be building everything from nothing." "I know hard work," Josephine said. "I am not afraid of it. As long as we are together, we can handle anything." They married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Val Verde Church. Mrs. Henderson cried through the entire service, and most of the Double T Ranch turned out to witness their foreman's best bronc buster marry the quiet laundry girl who had stolen his heart. Josephine wore a dress Dorothy had helped her make from ivory cotton, and she carried wildflowers picked that morning from the hillside where they would build their home. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Prescott kissed her in front of God and the whole town, Josephine felt something fundamental shift inside her. She was no longer the girl who had been traded for a train ticket, worthless and abandoned. She was Josephine Turner, beloved wife, valued partner, woman of worth. They spent their wedding night in a room at the hotel, and Prescott was gentle and patient as he made love to her for the first time. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Josephine whispered, "Thank you for saving me." "We saved each other," Prescott replied, kissing her forehead. "We're going to be so happy, Josephine. I promise you that." True to his word, Prescott purchased the 10 acres from Mr. Thatcher the following week. They spent every spare moment working on the land, clearing brush, marking out where the house and barn would stand. The other ranch hands helped during their off hours, and by the time winter threatened, they had a modest 2-room cabin with a fireplace and a sturdy roof. It was not much, but it was theirs. Josephine planted a garden as soon as the spring thaw came, nurturing tomatoes and beans and squash with the same care she gave everything she loved. Prescott built her a chicken coop, and they started with 6 hens that provided eggs and eventually chicks. He bought her a milk cow named Daisy, who was gentle and patient with Josephine's inexperienced hands. Their horse breeding operation started small with 2 mares purchased from a breeder in San Antonio. Prescott had an eye for quality animals, and he worked tirelessly to establish a reputation for producing sound, well-trained horses. By their second anniversary, they had sold 12 horses for good prices and were able to add a third room to the house. Life was not always easy. There were droughts that threatened their water supply, hard winters that tested their resources, times when money was tight and worry kept them both awake at night. But through it all, they had each other. Prescott would come in from a long day working the horses and pull Josephine into his arms, and somehow everything seemed manageable. They laughed together, worked together, built a life together one day at a time. Josephine discovered she was pregnant in the spring of their 3rd year of marriage. The midwife confirmed what Josephine had suspected for weeks, and she ran all the way home to tell Prescott, her heart singing with joy and a touch of fear. He was in the corral working with a young stallion when she arrived breathless. One look at her face and he vaulted over the fence, catching her in his arms. "What is wrong? Are you hurt?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are having a baby." The wonder that spread across Prescott's face was something Josephine would remember for the rest of her life. He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her belly. "A baby! We are having a baby!" "Are you happy?" she asked, running her fingers through his hair. Happy does not even begin to cover it. He stood and kissed her deeply. "You are giving me everything I have ever wanted, a home, a family, a future. I love you so much, Josephine." Their son was born on a cold January morning as snow fell soft and silent outside. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Josephine feared she might not survive it. But Prescott stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, telling her over and over that she was strong. She could do this. He was right here with her. When the baby finally came, red-faced and screaming with healthy lungs, Josephine wept with relief and joy. Prescott cut the cord with shaking hands, and then the midwife placed their son in Josephine's arms. "He is perfect," Prescott whispered, staring down at the tiny, wrinkled face. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, looking at her son, Josephine knew. "Thomas, after your father." Prescott's eyes grew shiny with tears. "Thomas Turner. He is going to be a good man. We will make sure of it." "We will love him," Josephine said. "That is what we will do. We will love him every single day and make sure he always knows he is wanted." Thomas grew into a sturdy boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's determined chin. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Carolyn, after Prescott's lost sister. The name felt like both a tribute and a hope, a way of keeping her memory alive. The years passed in a blur of hard work and small joys. The horse operation flourished, and they were able to expand their land to 20 acres. Prescott hired a young cowboy to help with the training, which gave him more time with the children. Josephine's garden grew larger each year, and she became known throughout Val Verde for her preserves and pickles. They attended church every Sunday, the 4 of them dressed in their best clothes, and Josephine never took for granted the sight of her family sitting together in that pew. Her children knew they were loved. They went to sleep each night in their own beds, in a home that was solid and permanent, with 2 parents who would never abandon them. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Josephine thought about her mother. She wondered if the woman had ever made it to Sacramento, if she had married her letter-writing man, if she ever thought about the daughter she had traded away. The anger had faded over the years, replaced by something closer to pity. Her mother had been so desperate for a different life that she had sacrificed the most important thing she had. Josephine could not imagine ever being that desperate, that broken. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Prescott one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. The children were asleep inside, the horses quiet in their paddock. "Spending that money on me, your savings from months of work?" Prescott looked at her like she had lost her mind. "That is the best money I ever spent. It brought me you, which brought me all of this." He gestured at their home, their land, the life they had built. I would spend it again 1,000 times over. I was so lost that day, Josephine said softly, so convinced I was worthless. And then you appeared and treated me like I mattered, like I was someone worth saving. You were always worth saving. You just needed someone to remind you of that. Prescott pulled her close, and she settled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. We found each other at exactly the right moment, two broken people helping each other heal. We are not broken anymore, Josephine observed. No, we are whole, together. On their 10th anniversary, Prescott surprised her with a trip. He had hired someone to watch the children and the horses, and he took Josephine to San Antonio for a week. They stayed in a fancy hotel, ate in restaurants, visited shops and theaters. It felt impossibly luxurious after years of frontier living. On their last night, as they lay in the hotel bed with moonlight streaming through the window, Prescott said, "I have been thinking about Caroline a lot lately. My sister, I mean. Wondering if she is still alive somewhere, if she is happy." "I hope she is," Josephine said. "I hope she found someone who helped her the way you helped me." "Me too." He was quiet for a moment. "I spent so many years eaten up with guilt over not saving her, but I have realized something. Maybe the best way to honor Caroline is to build a good life, to be a good man, to raise children who know they are loved. Maybe that is the redemption I have been looking for." "You are a good man," Josephine said fiercely. "The best man I have ever known, and Caroline, wherever she is, would be proud of you." They returned home to find their children healthy and the ranch running smoothly. Life continued its steady rhythm. Planting and harvest, foaling season and horse sales, church on Sundays and dances on Saturday nights. Thomas grew tall and lean like his father, developing the same easy way with horses. Caroline was quick and clever, always reading when she should have been doing chores. When Josephine was 35, they had another child, a surprise daughter they named Grace. By then, Thomas was 13 and Caroline 11, and they doted on their baby sister with fierce protectiveness. Josephine stood in her kitchen one morning, watching through the window as Prescott taught Thomas to throw a rope while Caroline sat on the fence rail with Grace on her lap. The garden was lush with summer vegetables, chickens scratched in the yard, and in the distance horses grazed on land that belonged to them free and clear. This was everything she had dreamed of during those dark months before Val Verde. Everything she had thought impossible on that train platform when her mother walked away. She had a home, a family, a husband who loved her more with each passing year. She had children who would never know what it felt like to be abandoned or unwanted. Mrs. Henderson, now elderly and frail, liked to say that some stories had sad beginnings but happy endings. Josephine's life was proof of that. Yes, her mother had traded her for a train ticket. Yes, she had felt worthless and alone. But a cowboy who could not understand such cruelty had helped her anyway, and in doing so had given them both a second chance. The hurt would always be part of her story, Josephine knew. But it was no longer the defining part. The defining part was what came after. The love, the healing, the family she and Prescott had built together from nothing but hope and hard work. Years continued to pass. Thomas married a girl from town and started his own horse ranch on land Prescott and Josephine gave him as a wedding present. Caroline became a teacher, following in the footsteps of Miss Ruth from the old boarding house. Grace grew into a beauty who had suitors lining up at their door, though Prescott glared at every single one of them. Josephine's hair turned gray, and Prescott's face grew lined with age, but the love between them never dimmed. They still sat on their porch at sunset, still held hands when they walked to church, still made each other laugh with private jokes and shared memories. On the 20th anniversary of the day they met, Prescott took Josephine back to Val Verde's train station. It had been expanded over the years, the platform lengthened, the depot building upgraded, but it was still recognizable as the place where their story had begun. "I remember standing right here," Prescott said, pointing to a spot near the ticket office, "seeing you with that conductor, looking so lost and brave at the same time, and I remember thinking that I had to do something, that I could not just walk away." I remember seeing you and thinking you were either a fool or a saint for getting involved. Josephine smiled at the memory. Turns out you were neither. You were just a good man with a kind heart. A good man who fell in love at first sight. I fell in love that day too, Josephine admitted. Maybe not at first sight, but when you bought me dinner and explained about Caroline, something in my heart recognized something in yours. Like we were two halves of the same whole, finally finding each other. They stood on that platform for a long time, watching trains come and go, passengers embarking on journeys to places unknown. Each train carried its own stories, its own possibilities for joy or heartbreak. But Josephine and Prescott had already completed their journey together. Prescott pulled her close, and Josephine rested her head against his chest, listening to the heartbeat that had been her comfort and her home for 2 decades. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for seeing me, for saving me, for loving me." "Thank you for letting me," Prescott replied, "for taking a chance on a cowboy who had no idea what he was doing but knew he could not let you face the world alone." They walked back through town, hand in hand, past the shops and businesses that had grown and changed over the years, past Mrs. Henderson's boarding house where Dorothy still lived, and waved at them from the porch. They walked home to their ranch, to the house they had built with their own hands, to the life they had created through love and determination and sheer stubborn hope. Their children visited often with grandchildren in tow, filling the house with noise and laughter. Josephine baked cookies and told stories, while Prescott taught the little ones to ride gentle horses in the corral. They had built something lasting, something good, something that would continue long after they were gone. In their later years, when their bodies grew tired and their steps slower, Josephine and Prescott would still sit on their porch and watch the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of fire and gold. And Josephine would think about that train platform, about the moment her life could have gone one way or another. She thought about the cowboy who had not understood how a mother could abandon her daughter, who had helped anyway, who had given her not just money or a room, but a future full of love and possibility. She thought about how the worst day of her life had become the doorway to the best years of her life, and she would take Prescott's weathered hand in hers and squeeze gently, and he would squeeze back, and no words would be needed because they had already said everything that mattered across 2 decades of building a life together. Their story had started with abandonment and confusion, with a transaction that reduced a human life to less than the cost of a train ticket, but it had transformed into something beautiful, a love story written in hard work and gentle moments, in children raised and horses trained, in gardens planted and houses built. Josephine had learned that being traded away did not define her worth, that being chosen by someone who saw her value did not make her whole because she had always been whole. But being loved by Prescott had helped her remember that truth, had helped her heal the wounded places until they became scars instead of open wounds. And Prescott had learned that he could not save everyone, could not undo the past or find his lost sister. But he could save one person, could build one family, could create one small pocket of goodness in an often cruel world. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. They grew old together on their land in Texas, surrounded by family and horses, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. And when people asked how they met, as people always do with couples who obviously adore each other, Josephine would simply say that a cowboy had helped her when she needed it most. She never mentioned the train ticket or her mother's betrayal. Those details belonged to the past, and Josephine had learned long ago that the past could not be changed, only survived and eventually transformed into wisdom. What mattered was the present and the future they had built, and the love that had sustained them through every challenge and celebration. What mattered was that Prescott Turner had seen a girl in trouble and had not walked away. What mattered was that Josephine Oakes had been brave enough to accept help and trust again. What mattered was the life they had created together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. And in the end, that was the story worth telling. Not the abandonment, but the redemption. Not the betrayal, but the love that followed. Not the trading away, but the choosing to stay. Their grandchildren would carry that story forward, would tell their own children about the great-grandmother who had once been lost, and the great-grandfather who had helped her find her way home. They would tell of a love that started on a train platform in Val Verde, Texas, and lasted a lifetime. They would tell of two people who had saved each other, who had built something lasting from the rubble of their separate griefs, who had proven that even the hardest beginnings could lead to the happiest endings. And on warm Texas evenings, when the sun set fire to the western sky and the horses whinnied softly in their paddock, Josephine and Prescott Turner would sit on their porch and hold hands and watch the day fade into night, grateful beyond words for the life they had found together. Because sometimes when everything falls apart, when you're standing alone on a train platform watching your mother abandon you, when you think you are worthless and broken beyond repair, sometimes a cowboy appears who does not understand cruelty but understands kindness, who helps not because he expects anything in return, but because helping is simply what good people do. And sometimes that single act of compassion becomes the foundation for a love story that spans decades, encompasses children and grandchildren and acres of Texas land, a love story that proves redemption is always possible. That was their story. That was their truth. And it was enough.